I'm Naomi Reyes, 23 recent college graduate and technically still my mother's full-time patient. The auditorium echoed with cheers and camera clicks. Flashbulbs strobed through the crowd like a field of fireflies in seizure. The graduates in navy robes were filing into neat rows, tassels bouncing, heels clacking, the bass of the walk-in song vibrating through the floor like a heartbeat on adrenaline. My name wasn't on the chair tags. My seat was in a parked SUV at the edge of the parking lot, tinted windows rolled up, graduation cap in my lap. "You know you can't go in there," Mom said, tightening the scarf over my head like she was bandaging a wound. "You're too fragile. The smells, the germs, the heat." She glanced at the crowd, her hand gripping the steering wheel, the other fishing out hand sanitizer for the third time that hour. I stared at the glass building ahead. It shimmered like a spaceship ready to launch someone else's life into orbit. I was not aboard. "But I'm fine today," I said, voice small. "No fever, no flare-ups. I took my meds." "You're not fine. The doctor said your levels were unstable. You're pale." She touched my forehead. Clammy. I wasn't pale. I was nervous. When I reached for the car door, her voice turned sharp. "Naomi, don't embarrass yourself. Or me. Please." Her words were always framed like concern but polished with control. I nodded slowly, shrinking back into the passenger seat. The diploma mock-up rolled in my hands like a surrender flag. Outside, the ceremony began. My classmates' names were being called one by one, echoing through speakers I could barely hear from the parking lot. I imagined them hugging parents, shaking the dean's hand, turning their tassels in unison. I imagined that moment when my name would come and the microphone would pause confused. I should have been on that stage. If you've ever had a moment hijacked, stolen by someone who thought they knew better, drop a comment or let me know where you're watching from. Hit like or subscribe if you've ever felt invisible while everyone clapped for someone else. 10 minutes later, I watched as a familiar man stepped away from the stage and out into the open air, squinting through the crowd. He was tall, silver-haired, with the soft walk of someone used to being observed, not questioned. "Is that?" I whispered. Mom tensed beside me. It was Dean Harrington, the dean. He walked briskly across the parking lot, holding a real diploma folder. An assistant jogged after him, heels clicking in panic. He scanned each car like he was inspecting a parade of suspects until he reached ours. He tapped on my window. I slowly rolled it down. "Naomi Reyes," he asked. His voice was even, but loud enough for nearby attendees to turn their heads. My throat tightened. "Yes, sir." He nodded once. "Then, in recognition of your exceptional academic record and dedication, despite personal challenges, the university would like to award you this diploma in person." He extended it toward me. My mother's eyes went wide, her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years, she had no script. People were watching. Phones lifted. The crowd stilled. All eyes shifted to me. I took the diploma with trembling hands. The embossed seal caught the sunlight, the same one I'd dreamed of for 4 years. Silence rippled across the parking lot, then whispers, then gasps. And in that moment, for the first time, I felt something shift. The attention was mine. The car felt smaller now, warmer. I hadn't realized how tight my chest had been until the dean's footsteps faded, replaced by murmurs from the nearby families. Some people clapped, others just watched in that lingering, silent curiosity only humans can sustain without saying a word. I held the diploma like it might vanish. The weight of it, literal and symbolic, pressed into my palms. My mom was staring straight ahead, jaw locked, as if she could will the entire moment into non-existence. "You didn't tell me you invited him," she muttered. "I didn't," I whispered. "I think he came on his own." Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Well, now everyone thinks something's wrong with us. He embarrassed you." I looked at her. "No, Mom. He didn't." But I knew what she meant. It wasn't the attention that scared her. It was the narrative slipping from her hands. She'd spent years curating the story of Naomi the fragile, Naomi the patient, Naomi the broken porcelain girl. Now, someone outside her script had just rewritten the ending. She turned the key in the ignition. "Let's go home." I didn't argue. I was tired. Not from sickness, just from being so tightly managed that even my victories had to be postponed. Quieted. Controlled. On the drive back, she didn't say much. I stared out the window, remembering every time I'd nearly made it to something important. Field trips I'd missed. Parties I was too sensitive for. Concerts she canceled for my safety. And every time, it had felt easier to believe her than to fight back. Until senior year. Until I started secretly going to class in person instead of Zoom. Until I told the school nurse I wasn't fainting, I was fine. I'd even stopped taking some of the medications, the ones that made my hands shake and my stomach twist. I just hadn't told Mom. The truth is, I hadn't been truly sick in over a year. But I didn't know how to say that to a woman who had built her life around caring for me. We pulled into the driveway. Our house was a small white ranch home with blue shutters and a perfectly manicured lawn. Everything always looked fine from the outside. Inside, it was sterile. No dust, no clutter. Like a model home waiting for a buyer. I went to my room and closed the door. My graduation cap was still on my lap. I ran my fingers over the edge, thinking about how different today could have been if I'd just walked inside on my own. I opened the diploma folder again. There it was, my full name in gold, the school's seal, the signature of the dean. Underneath it, I noticed something tucked into the folder, an envelope. I hadn't seen it earlier. I opened it. "Naomi, we missed you today. I want you to know your professors voted unanimously to recognize your commitment. When I asked where you were, your advisor told me what had been happening. I don't want to overstep, but I do want to say this degree is yours. Not because you survived something, but because you earned it. Come see us when you're ready. Dean Harrington." I reread the letter twice. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from relief. Someone saw, someone understood. The next morning, Mom didn't bring up the dean or the crowd or the envelope. She acted like none of it had happened. Instead, she brought me my vitamins, lined up like soldiers on a tray. I pushed them aside. "I'm not taking those anymore." She froze mid-step. "But I haven't needed them. Not in months." Her eyes narrowed. "That's ridiculous. You have Mom," I said softly. "No, I had symptoms. A long time ago. But I'm okay now. I've been going to class on campus. I've been walking around, exercising." She blinked. "Once, twice. You didn't tell me you wouldn't have let me." Her face contorted hurt, confusion, something tangled in grief. "I was trying to protect you. I know, but I don't need that kind of protection." A long pause stretched between us. Then she set the tray down and walked out of the room. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the alumni portal. I checked the job board, updated my resume. For the first time, I selected available to relocate. That afternoon, my cousin Sierra saw the video. Dean walking across the parking lot. "You were trending. I hadn't even known anyone had filmed it. Curious." I opened Instagram. A short video had been shared by the university's student media page. The caption read, "When the graduate couldn't come to the stage came to her. Congratulations, Naomi Reyes." There were over 60,000 views, hundreds of comments. Chills. She deserves the world. This made me cry. I don't even know her, but I'm so proud. And then, buried among the flood was one that made my breath catch. I think I know her. She used to sit in the library, corner table near the window. Quiet. Always alone. Didn't know she was fighting anything. Respect. The library. I hadn't realized anyone ever noticed me there, but someone had. I messaged Sierra back. Think I might finally leave this place. About damn time. That evening, Mom made dinner: chicken broth, steamed carrots, rice, the sick person's menu. She served mine with the usual care, napkin folded, plate warm. I looked down at the tray, then at her. "Mom," I said, "can we eat at the table?" Her hand froze on the edge of the tray. The table. "Yeah, like normal people." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. "All right." We sat across from each other, forks clinking softly, neither of us saying much. Halfway through the meal, she reached across the table and touched my wrist. "You really don't feel sick anymore?" "No," I said gently. "Not for a long time." She looked at me like she didn't quite believe it but wanted to. We finished dinner in silence. Afterward, I went back to my room, opened a new tab, and started looking at apartments in Portland, then Seattle, then New York. Anywhere but here. Anywhere I could start becoming someone more than a name on a tray, more than a ghost in a robe in a parking lot. I had a degree. I had a name. And now, I had a chance to use both. The first place I applied to was a publishing house in Portland. I didn't even hesitate, just uploaded my resume, clicked submit, and stared at the confirmation message like it might evaporate if I blinked too hard. I hadn't told my mom. Not yet. For the next 2 weeks, our house was strangely quiet. She didn't ask if I needed my pills. She didn't check my temperature. It was like she didn't know what role to play anymore, now that I wasn't the frail, dependent daughter in bed. But I kept moving forward. I started going on walks alone, long ones around the neighborhood where nobody knew who I was or what I used to be. I even wandered into the community library one afternoon, breathing in the dusty quiet like it was new oxygen. I hadn't realized how starved I was for independence until I tasted it. Then, on a cloudy Wednesday, I got the email, subject interview invitation, associate editor. Crescent Press. I stared at it for so long that the text started to blur. "Naomi," I whispered to myself. Then louder. "Naomi. They want to talk to you." I clutched my laptop like it might fly away. That night. Over dinner. Actual dinner. At the kitchen table. With grilled salmon and rice. I told my mom. I applied to a job in Portland. I said carefully, eyes on my fork. And they want to interview me. She didn't react at first. Just slowly chewed her food. Then finally, Portland. I nodded. It's a publishing company. Entry level. But real. She put her fork down and folded her hands in front of her. "So you're just leaving? Not today, but soon. If I get it?" A silence settled between us. Not angry, just uncertain. She blinked a few times, as if adjusting her vision. "You'll need insurance. And your medical records, I've already transferred most of it to a new provider. I don't need the specialists anymore. My last tests were normal." She flinched slightly, like I'd spoken a curse, then whispered, "But what if it comes back?" I met her eyes. "Then I'll deal with it. But I want to live. Not just wait around." For the first time, I saw something shift behind her expression, something like grief. Maybe she wasn't mourning my health. Maybe she was mourning the version of herself that only made sense when I was sick. After dinner, she didn't say much, But she didn't argue either. That, I took as progress. The interview was set for Friday morning. I picked my outfit days in advance: crisp white blouse, navy blazer, simple necklace. I practiced questions in front of the mirror. I Googled the company until I could recite their mission statement in my sleep. When the day came, I set up in the living room. Bright light, clean background, good Wi-Fi. The recruiter, a woman named Laura, smiled warmly from her square on the screen. "Naomi, we were really impressed by your writing samples, especially your senior thesis. You have a quiet but sharp way of observing the world." I smiled. "Thank you. I guess I've always had more time to watch than speak." She chuckled. "Sometimes. That's what makes a good editor." The rest of the interview passed in a blur. I remembered being calm, articulate, maybe even a little funny. When we wrapped up, Laura said we'll be in touch soon. But this was a very strong start. When I closed the laptop, my hands trembled not from fear, but from hope. I turned around and saw Mom standing in the doorway, arms folded, unreadable. "How did it go?" I nodded. "I think it went well." She hesitated, then walked over and sat beside me. "I've never seen you talk to someone like that," she said softly, confident, like you knew who you were. "I think I'm starting to." A few days later, the job offer came through. I was alone when I read it, sitting on the back porch, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, the air smelling like cut grass and sun-warmed pavement. "We are thrilled to offer you the position of associate editor at Crescent Press, beginning next month." I cried, quietly, fiercely. Then I printed the email and placed it on the kitchen table like a peace offering. When Mom came home from the store and saw it, she read it in silence. Her face was calm, but her eyes were red. "I guess you're really going," she whispered. "I have to." She nodded, then turned away and went to the sink. That night, she knocked on my door, something she hadn't done in years. "I packed some things," she said. "First aid kit, emergency meds, your documents, just in case." I walked over and took the bag. It was heavy, thoughtful. "Thank you." She paused, then reached out and touched my hair. "You always were stronger than I thought." I didn't say anything, just leaned into her touch for a moment longer than necessary. Packing was surreal. I donated old clothes, boxed up books, wrapped keepsakes in newspaper. I left behind the medical tray, the thermometers, the plastic pill sorters. Sierra came to help on my last day. She carried boxes with ease, blasting music in her car, chattering about how I was finally getting out of this house of ghosts. When it was time to say goodbye, Mom stood at the door, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You'll call?" she asked. "Of course. And text if anything happens." "Yes, Mom. And remember to eat real food." "I will." She nodded. Then, just before I turned to leave, she grabbed my wrist. "Naomi." I looked at her. "I'm proud of you," she said, "even if I don't know how to show it." I smiled. "You just did." We hugged. It was brief, stiff, but real. And then I got in Sierra's car and drove away. We didn't speak much on the drive. I stared out the window, watching the town dissolve behind me. Grocery stores I used to be too tired to walk through, parks I wasn't allowed to play in, streets where I was always someone else's shadow. Now, I was heading somewhere new, with nothing but a diploma, a job, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, my body was finally mine. The apartment in Portland was small but bright. Top floor, lots of windows. I slept on an air mattress for the first week, but I didn't care. On my first day at Crescent Press, I wore that same blazer and walked into the building like I belonged. And when I sat at my new desk, a copy of a manuscript in front of me, I took a deep breath and smiled. No one here knew me as the girl in the car. They just knew me as Naomi. The days in Portland started to flow like ink across the page, sometimes fast, sometimes sluggish, always unpredictable. I was learning how to be a person again, not someone cared for, but someone counted on. It was new, beautiful, terrifying. Every morning, I caught the bus at 8:05. I'd press my back against the vinyl seat, coffee in hand, eyes on the skyline as it peeked through mist and power lines. Sometimes I'd listen to podcasts about memoir writing or weird historical facts. Other times, I'd sit in silence, just breathing something that still felt miraculous in its simplicity. At Crescent Press, my job was mostly editing first drafts, hopeful, rough, wildly ambitious manuscripts that came in from across the country. I learned to scan for structure, tone, pacing. I learned what made a sentence sing, and I learned how to gently tell a writer their 900-page fantasy epic probably didn't need 3 prologues. I didn't say much the first couple weeks. My coworkers were nice, quirky, caffeine-fueled, casually brilliant, but they'd known each other for years. I was just the new girl from out of state. Still, I was content. Content to be invisible for now, as long as I wasn't powerless. And then one day, something shifted. It was during our Monday morning meeting. We were sitting around the conference table, each editor going over the week's submissions, when Laura, the same woman who'd interviewed me, paused over a manuscript. "I need someone to take this one. It's raw. But there's something there," she said. "It's a memoir woman writing about surviving Munchausen by proxy." My pen stopped mid-scribble. My stomach went cold. Laura glanced around the table. "Any takers?" No one spoke. I don't know what made me raise my hand. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something else. But I did. "I can take it," I said. My voice was steady. My hands weren't. Laura raised an eyebrow, then smiled. "Great. It's all yours." That night, I sat at my desk and opened the document. The manuscript was unpolished. The author's voice was halting, like she wasn't sure she had the right to speak. But every paragraph echoed, not in plot, but in feeling. I knew this kind of pain. The quiet surveillance, the smiling control, the confusion of being grateful and afraid of the same person. The author wrote about her mother's endless caretaking, how it started as love and turned into a cage. I read all 312 pages in one night. I didn't take notes. I just read and cried. The next morning, I emailed Laura, subject manuscript 448, notes. "Hi Laura, just wanted to say thank you for assigning this one to me. I feel deeply connected to it, and I'd love the chance to work closely with the author if possible. Best, Naomi." Her reply came within the hour. "Absolutely. Take your time with it. And if you want to write the editor's note for the pitch packet, go for it." I stared at that last line. An editor's note. My voice. On paper. Tied to someone else's pain and survival. I opened a blank document. Typed. There are stories that whisper. And then there are stories that scratch. Slowly. Against the inside of your chest, demanding breath, space, and dignity. This is one of those stories. I didn't sign it with my full name, just N. Reyes. 2 weeks later, the manuscript was accepted for development, and people at work started to know who I was. They stopped calling me new girl. They asked for my opinion. They forwarded me pieces they thought I'd like. One even slipped me a sticky note after lunch. "You've got a weird superpower for broken stories. Don't lose it." That night, I called my mom. She picked up after 3 rings. "Naomi, I got a project published." I said, "My first one." She was quiet. "What's it about?" I hesitated. "Someone learning to live after being controlled." Another pause. Well, she said, that's good. It wasn't enthusiasm, but it wasn't denial either. I'm proud of you, she added quickly, like the words might disappear. Thanks. I didn't mention the subject. I didn't need to. She knew, and I could hear something in her voice I hadn't before. Not guilt, not anger, maybe fear, maybe loss. I hung up first. Weeks passed. Fall folded into winter. I bought my first real coat, learned how to use a French press, found a bookstore that sold used poetry collections for $1 each. I read one a night. I even started dating casually. Nothing serious. Just people who asked about my favorite movies. Not my medical history. I didn't tell them much about home, only what mattered. Then, one Saturday morning, I got a letter. An actual letter. Return address: Naomi Reyes, Portland, or Sender Dean Harrington. I opened it carefully. Naomi, I wanted to thank you. Your story made a difference. After the graduation video circulated, a few students came forward, ones we hadn't seen in months. One girl said, if Naomi could get out of the car, maybe I can walk into the building. We've started a support initiative on campus for students with complex medical or home situations. We're calling it the Reyes Initiative. Hope you're well and thriving. Dean H. I pressed the paper to my chest. My name, a program, a pathway for someone else to get free. I never expected that. That night, I sat at my window, looking out at the city. The streets below glowed orange from the traffic lights, soft fog rolling over the pavement like memory. I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like someone finally arriving, not at a destination, but at a self I could recognize. And maybe, in some quiet way, I was building something that others could walk on too. Not a stage, not a ceremony, just a way forward. A road out of the passenger seat. Portland had a way of softening me. Maybe it was the rain, constant and non-judgmental, or the way the trees didn't care who was watching when they changed colors. Here, I was just another person learning how to breathe again, learning how to eat alone in public without flinching, learning that silence wasn't always suspicious. I walked more, sometimes for hours. I wandered into alleys filled with murals and tiny cafes that sold tea with names like Wounded Healer or Rooted Soul. I wasn't trying to find myself. I was trying to stop hiding from the version of me I'd buried beneath thermometers and whispered diagnoses. One Sunday, I walked past a community center with a small flyer taped to the door. Write your story, free memoir workshop for beginners, all welcome. I took a photo of it without thinking. That night, I sat at my desk, fingers hovering over my laptop keys. I wasn't sure what story I wanted to tell, only that something inside me wanted to speak. Not edit, not rewrite someone else's voice, but mine. The first session was the following Saturday. When I walked into the room, there were 6 folding chairs arranged in a semicircle. A pot of burnt coffee steamed quietly in the corner. A whiteboard listed 3 questions. What moment changed you? What truth did you hide? What would you say now, if you could? The facilitator was a woman in her 40s with cropped silver hair and eyes that scanned the room like she'd seen every kind of secret before. She smiled at me. First time I nodded. Yeah. I'm more used to being on the other side of the pen. Maybe that's exactly why you're here. I took a seat. We began by writing for 10 minutes straight. No stopping, no deleting. The prompt was simple. Write the moment your life divided into before and after. My pen hit the paper before I knew what I was doing. I wrote about the car, the parking lot, the way the robe stayed folded in my lap while other girls tossed theirs in the air, the way Mom gripped the wheel, and I gripped the truth I was too afraid to say. When I finished, my hands were shaking. The facilitator walked over and gently tapped my page. "That's the beginning," she whispered. "That's where you start." I nodded, tears welling despite myself. For the next 5 weeks, I returned every Saturday. I wrote about my childhood fevers, the revolving door of specialists, the way Mom would sit by my bed at night, whispering, "You're not safe without me." I wrote about the pills, the cancellations, the birthdays spent inside. But I also wrote about small rebellions sneaking out to sit on the back porch at midnight, hiding a Kit Kat under my mattress, going to campus alone the first time and crying in the bathroom not because I was scared, but because I'd done it. Each week, we shared parts aloud. One Saturday, I read the scene where I turned down the vitamins. When I looked up, no one spoke. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. The facilitator said softly, "That's the first time you said no, isn't it?" I nodded. "Then that's your climax. The real one. Not the dean. Not the diploma. That moment." She was right. The shift wasn't public. It was personal. The hardest things I'd ever done happened in rooms with only 2 people, me and my mother. After the final session, we each printed a bound draft of our pieces. Mine was titled Passenger Seat. I didn't know if I'd ever publish it, but I held the pages close, like a heartbeat. Back at work, things were steady. I was offered more responsibility, more challenging manuscripts, even a spot on an editorial panel. But something started to stir in me that I hadn't expected. I wanted to teach. Not full-time, just once in a while, a workshop, a space, a place like the one that had held me. So I reached out to the community center. And 2 weeks later, they said yes. Memoir Lab Exploring Memory through Writing Instructor, Naomi Reyes. The first time I stood in front of a room and said, "Hi, I'm Naomi, and I'll be guiding you through your story." I nearly choked on the words, but then a girl in the front row raised her hand and said, "I don't know if I even have a story. Is that okay?" I smiled. That's exactly how I started. And then we began. One evening, after class, I opened my inbox to find a name I hadn't seen in months, from Laura at Crescent Press. Subject: upcoming event. We'd love to include you inside, was an invitation to speak on a panel about memoir editing and survivor narratives. I reread it 3 times. They wanted me to speak, not behind the scenes, not a note in the margins. Me. The panel was set for January, back at my university, the same auditorium, the same building I never walked into. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I emailed back, "Yes, I'll be there." The day arrived colder than I expected. I flew in the night before, staying at a tiny hotel with scratchy sheets and an old radiator that hissed like it was alive. That morning, I took a cab to campus. When we passed the parking lot, I asked the driver to stop. He looked confused but did it anyway. I got out and walked slowly to the exact spot where the car had been parked. The air was still. My hands were bare. I knelt down, brushed my fingers over the pavement like it might remember me. "Thank you," I whispered. Then I stood up and walked into the building. No robe, no parent beside me, just me, Naomi, whole. The panel was small, intimate, maybe 50 people in the room, mostly students, a few faculty members. I was the second speaker. When it was my turn, I took the mic, cleared my throat, and said I wasn't supposed to be here. A few years ago, I watched this ceremony from a parking lot just outside these walls. My mother said I was too sick to walk in. I believed her. For years, I believed I was only the sick girl, the careful girl. But stories have a way of breaking through the silence we wrap around ourselves. The room was so quiet I could hear someone shifting in their seat. I continued. "Today, I'm an editor. a writer, a teacher, and someone who's still learning how to tell the truth. Not for revenge, not for pity, but because silence never protected me. It only delayed me. When I stepped off the stage, the applause came slow, gentle. No roaring cheers, no standing ovation, but one girl approached me after, notebook clutched to her chest. She whispered, "My mom's like that too. I didn't think anyone would understand." I touched her arm. "Start writing, even if it hurts." She nodded, eyes shining. That night, I walked alone through campus. The lampposts buzzed overhead, the sidewalks damp and glistening. I passed the library, the quad, the science hall. I ended at the edge of the auditorium steps, where the echo of my name had once stopped short. Now, I said it aloud. Naomi Reyes. No microphone, no stage, just me, and for the first time, the echo answered back. I returned to Portland with a different kind of quiet inside me, not the silence of being stifled, but the peace that comes after speaking aloud what was once unspeakable. Back home, the city hadn't changed, but I had. The street still curved the same way, the corner bakery still overcharged for croissants, and the neighbors still left their porch lights on like lighthouses for the lost. But I walked slower now, not cautiously, but deliberately. I was no longer running from what I'd endured. I was living with it. And that was different. The workshop at the community center continued to grow. New people arrived every session, some older, some younger. A few who barely made eye contact at first, but whose pens moved like they were writing to save themselves. I saw them. I was them. One night, I stayed behind after class to clean up. A girl who couldn't have been older than 18 hovered near the doorway, holding her notebook like it was a shield. "Miss Reyes," she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I looked up, smiling gently. "Just Naomi. Please." She stepped forward slowly. "Can I show you something? I haven't read it to anyone yet." I nodded and sat back down. She opened her notebook with trembling hands and began reading. Her story unfolded like a wound. Her father's addiction, her mother's silence, the way she kept score of nights she slept on the floor because it felt safer. She didn't cry when she read it, but I did. When she finished, I said nothing at first, just reached out, touched her notebook, and said, "That was brave." She blinked at me. "It still feels fake, like I'm making it worse than it was." I exhaled. That's what trauma does. It convinces you your own pain isn't real unless someone else bleeds too. Her lip quivered. "So, do you think I should keep going?" "Absolutely," I said. "And next time, bring 2 copies. One to read, and one to burn, just in case you need to let go." She smiled faintly. "Okay." After she left, I sat alone under the flickering fluorescent lights. I thought about all the times I had nearly stopped writing my own story because it felt like I didn't deserve to tell it. That girl reminded me why I kept going. The next morning, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, Naomi. It's Mom. Can we talk? I'd like to see you. Just a visit. No agenda." I stared at the screen for a long time. In the months since I left, we'd kept in loose contact holiday calls, brief check-ins, but she'd never asked to visit. I replied cautiously, "Sure," when she suggested next weekend. I told her I'd meet her at a small cafe near my apartment. Public, neutral, safe. When the day came, I arrived early. I wore a soft sweater and jeans, no makeup. I wanted to be seen as I was not polished, not sick. Just me. She walked in 5 minutes late, clutching her purse like it was full of secrets. She looked thinner, tired. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on me. "Naomi," she said quietly, as if unsure the words still belonged to her. "Hi, Mom." We hugged briefly, awkwardly, then sat. She ordered chamomile tea. I got a black coffee. For a moment, we just stared at our mugs. Then she said, "You look healthy." I smiled. "I am." She nodded, stirring her tea though she hadn't added anything. "I saw the video of your panel. Someone forwarded it to me. You spoke beautifully." I didn't know what to say, so I sipped my coffee. "You didn't mention me by name," she continued. "But I knew. I wasn't trying to shame you." I said, "Just tell the truth." She looked out the window. "I know. I didn't realize how much I took from you. I thought I was helping." "I know you did," I said. "But help doesn't mean control, and love isn't a diagnosis." She flinched slightly, then exhaled. "I've been seeing someone. A therapist. She said I might have something called factitious disorder imposed on another." The words floated between us like smoke. "That's what I thought," I said softly. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I know." We sat in silence again. Then she reached into her purse and slid a small envelope across the table. "I found this in your baby book. It's a letter I wrote the day you came home from the hospital." I hesitated, then opened it. The handwriting was shaky. The ink had faded. "Naomi, I promise I'll always keep you safe, even if it means protecting you from the world, even if it means you never leave me." I looked up at her. "That last part," she said, "it's what I thought love was. Keeping you close, keeping you small." Tears stung my eyes. "I forgive you," I said. Finally. She reached for my hand, and I let her hold it. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't mother and daughter, nurse and patient. It was just two women trying to understand each other's ruins. After we said goodbye, I walked home slowly. The air was cool, but not biting. The city was lit in gold, street lamps shimmering off wet pavement. That night, I lit a candle in my apartment, sat at my desk, and opened passenger seat. I read the pages like I was someone else, a stranger to my own history. And when I finished, I knew. It was ready. The next morning, I emailed it to a small press I trusted. The subject line read, "Memoir Submission. Passenger Seat by Naomi Reyes." I didn't expect a reply anytime soon, or ever. But it didn't matter. I had written the truth, and I was still standing, still breathing, still becoming. A few weeks later, I received a package at my door. I hadn't ordered anything, so I opened it cautiously. Inside was a bound manuscript, the memoir I had edited, the one about the girl who survived her mother's fabricated illnesses. Tucked inside the cover was a card. "Naomi, thank you for helping me find my voice. Without your edits, I don't know if I could have told this story. You didn't just make my book better. You made me believe I had the right to exist. Avery." I sat on the floor, the book in my lap, and I cried. Not from grief, from relief. For every girl who'd ever been hidden, for every voice that was once silenced, for the parts of myself I thought I'd lost forever and found again in someone else's story. A few days after receiving Avery's manuscript, I decided to take the long way home from work. I walked through Laurelhurst Park, where the trees bowed low like they were whispering secrets to each other. Kids ran barefoot in the grass. A woman with gray dreadlocks sketched quietly by the pond. A man played violin under a willow, the music floating through the branches like a question left unanswered. I sat on a bench and let the city breathe around me. My phone buzzed with a notification, but I didn't look. I was learning that not every alert was urgent, that sometimes the most important things didn't vibrate or blink. When I finally unlocked my phone, I saw the message from Crescent Press subject. "Congratulations, your memoir is being considered for publication." I froze. I read it again, then a third time. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I just sat there, hands trembling, heart loud in my chest. The email explained that passenger seat had been selected for internal review. The board was impressed. They wanted a formal proposal. They were asking if I would consider expanding it, adding a few chapters about the aftermath, about life after the revelation, about healing. I took a deep breath and looked out across the pond. I could do that. I was doing that. Later that night, I sat at my desk and reopened the file, but instead of jumping into the manuscript, I opened a new document titled After. The cursor blinked. Patient. I wrote, "Healing is not a clean process. It stutters. It relapses. It stings like disinfectant. It is both violent and quiet, but it happens despite everything." I didn't know yet how many pages I could give them, but I knew I had more to say. The next few weeks were a blur of rewriting. I revisited old scenes, not to change what happened, but to view them from the clarity of distance. I added a chapter about the first time I went to urgent care alone, one about the night I threw out my pill organizer, one about standing in front of a mirror and not flinching when I said, "You are not broken." It wasn't easy. Some nights I sat in bed holding old journals, reading my teenage handwriting like it belonged to someone else. The girl who kept charts of every symptom, the one who apologized every time she asked for air. I whispered to her, "You're safe now. I'm here." When I finally sent the expanded version to the publisher, I attached a note. "I don't have all the answers, but I know what survival feels like, and this is the shape it takes for me." They replied within 4 days. "We're honored to publish this memoir. You've written something necessary. Contract attached." I printed the email, held it in both hands, then set it down on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. I thought of my mother. I hadn't told her yet. The next day, I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Naomi, hi. Mom." We exchanged small talk weather, how the neighbor's dog kept digging up her garden, a TV show we used to watch together. Then I said I sold the book. Silence. Then your memoir. Yes. More silence. "What did you decide to include?" "Only what's true. From my side." She exhaled, slowly. "And you're publishing it with your real name?" "Yes." "I see." I waited. Let the air hang between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I bought a copy of the memoir you edited." "Avery's." I recognized the story. It was hard to read, but I finished it. I blinked. "You did." "I did." She paused. "It helped." Her voice cracked. "I didn't want to be that kind of mother. Naomi." "I know. But I was." "I know that too." She didn't apologize, not outright. But it was the first time I believed she truly saw herself from the outside. That mattered more than any apology could. We ended the call gently. No accusations, no grand reconciliation. Just two people trying. After we hung up, I went to the window and opened it. The breeze came in soft and cold. I stood there a while, letting the air touch my skin like a blessing. That weekend, Sierra came to visit. We hadn't seen each other in person since I left. She showed up at my door with Thai food and 3 kinds of sparkling water. "You look taller," she said, hugging me, "like your spine finally woke up." I laughed. Maybe it did. We stayed up late on the couch, knees tucked under throw blankets, old sitcom reruns playing in the background. "I still remember you in that car," she said. "At graduation, you looked like a ghost." And then the dean walked up, and the whole damn parking lot stopped breathing. I smiled. It didn't feel real. "Well, it was," she said, "and you earned every second of it." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, wrapped box. "For your bookshelf," she said. I opened it. It was a framed photo, me and her at age 8, grinning with chocolate-covered mouths, holding up paper crowns we made from cereal boxes. A different kind of memory, one I hadn't been allowed to keep close. I found it in an old album at Grandma's house, she said. Thought you could use a reminder. I placed it on the shelf next to passenger seat. The next morning, she left early to catch her flight. I stood in the doorway after she hugged me goodbye, waving as she climbed into her Uber. Then I went back inside, made tea, and sat down to begin planning something new. A follow-up workshop, this one for young women in foster care. A friend of mine had started a nonprofit and asked if I'd run a storytelling program. Just 4 sessions. Nothing big. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. Later, while designing the flyer, I struggled to pick a title. I tried writing through it, then breaking the silence, but neither felt right. Then, suddenly, it came to me. Room for voice. Because that was what had been taken from me all those years. Not just the stage, not just the microphone, but the room, the space to exist, to speak, to unfold. Now, I was building that space for others. No robes, no ceremonies, just room. That evening, I went out to the bookstore near my apartment. The owner, a quiet woman named Elise, always saved the new memoir releases for me. She smiled when she saw me walk in. I saved you a copy, she said. Top shelf? By the window. I walked over and reached up. My breath caught. There it was. Passenger Seat by Naomi Reyes. My name. On the spine. On the cover. Real. Physical. Unavoidable. I held it to my chest and closed my eyes. Not for long. Just long enough to remember the car. The scarf. The hand that pressed my forehead. The voice that said, "You're too sick." And the moment I decided that wasn't the whole truth anymore, I walked to the register. Elise rang it up and placed it gently in a paper bag. "I'm proud of you," she said, as if we'd known each other for years. "Thank you," I whispered. Then I stepped out into the night, book in hand, air cool against my skin. And I walked home, alone, on legs that no longer trembled. 3 months after Passenger Seat hit the shelves, I received a letter forwarded through my publisher. It arrived folded inside a navy envelope with gold handwriting and no return address. I knew, even before I opened it, that it wasn't from a stranger. The handwriting was my mother's. It had softened. Naomi. I read every page. Twice. At first, it hurt. I won't lie. I wanted to argue with you, defend myself, say it wasn't that bad. But I didn't. Because I saw the girl you were, and the woman you are, and both are telling the truth. There are things I can't take back, and things I still don't understand. But I want to try. No conditions, no defenses, just try. If there's a place for me in your new life, I'd like to stand somewhere in the background, quietly, proudly. Love. Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, not to forget it, but to let it rest. I wasn't sure yet what I would say in return, and maybe that was okay. Healing, I was learning, had more to do with pacing than perfect timing. At work, things had changed. People greeted me differently. My inbox filled with not just manuscript queries, but invitations, podcasts, panels, college guest lectures. It felt surreal, like I had stepped out of one skin and into another. One afternoon, Laura stopped by my desk with a soft smile and a folder. "Naomi, there's a high school literary festival next month. Keynote speaker slot just opened up. I told them about you." My heart skipped. "Keynote." She nodded. "You'd be brilliant." I hesitated. "High schoolers." She leaned on my desk. "The ones who need it most." I didn't give her an answer right away. That night, I stared at my ceiling for hours. What would I even say to a room full of teenagers that the people meant to protect you sometimes hurt you the most? That silence can dress itself up as love. That healing doesn't feel like rising, it feels like walking barefoot through your own wreckage. Maybe, but maybe I'd also say this. You're allowed to name what was done to you. You're allowed to walk out of the story you were given and write your own. I said yes. The festival was held in an auditorium that smelled like pencil shavings and stale gum. Rows of folding chairs filled the space, and students buzzed quietly in the audience, scrolling their phones or whispering behind hoodies. I stood backstage, clutching my note cards, listening to the MC butcher my bio into the microphone. Editor, author, survivor of long-term illness, here to share her story. Please welcome Naomi Reyes. Applause, polite and brief. I stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit me like a warm hand. I blinked once, twice, then stepped up to the mic. Hi, I'm Naomi, I began. And I didn't attend my own graduation. That got their attention. I sat in a car in the parking lot, while my name echoed through a microphone in a building I wasn't allowed to enter. My mom said I was too sick. I almost believed her. I told them the story. Not all of it, but enough. About the dean walking out to my car. About being handed my diploma through the window. About the moment I realized I'd let someone else narrate my entire life. I ended with this. Some of you have been silenced. By family, by fear, by shame. But if you can, even in the smallest way, speak, write, paint, sing. Whatever it takes to remind yourself that your voice is real and that it matters. Silence, then claps. Louder than I expected. Afterward, a group of students approached me, notebooks clutched to their chests. One girl said, "Your book made me want to talk to my school counselor about my dad." Another whispered, "I thought I was the only one who wasn't allowed to be normal." A boy handed me a folded paper with a drawing of a bird perched on a broken chain. Below it, he'd written "Passenger no more." I stood there, stunned. They weren't thanking me because I was brave. They were thanking me because I made them feel possible. That night, I walked through the campus alone, passing clusters of students laughing by vending machines, arguing over classes, texting their rides, all of them so young, so raw. I thought of myself at their age, how I hadn't known I was caged because the bars had always been there. But now I was the one holding the key, and I was giving it away. Weeks passed. The book sales slowed. The buzz settled. Life returned to its slower rhythm. I was grateful. I found myself craving simplicity. Sunday markets, grocery lists, late-night conversations about things that didn't hurt. One evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table when a knock came at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it cautiously. My mom stood there, holding a small plant in both hands, a lavender bush, still in its nursery pot. "I wasn't sure if this was okay," she said, "but I was in town. I thought maybe we could go for a walk." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." We walked in silence for a while, past shops and bakeries, past the bookstore that carried my memoir. She stopped to look at the window display but didn't say a word. Eventually, we sat on a bench near the river. She handed me the plant. I looked it up. Lavender helps with healing and sleep. I ran my fingers gently along the leaves. "Thank you." She turned to me. "I'm not asking to erase anything or fix it. I just want to know you again, as you are now, not who I imagined you'd be." For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I leaned my head gently on her shoulder. "I'm still figuring that out," I whispered. "That's okay," she said. "I'll wait." We stayed there until the sky dimmed. When we stood to leave, I felt something unfamiliar between us. Not forgiveness, not closure, but something gentler. Recognition. We were no longer mother and child in the old way. We were two people learning how to coexist without harm. Two women planting something uncertain but alive. Back home, I repotted the lavender and placed it by the window. Every morning, I watered it. I watched it stretch toward the sun. Some days, I swear it leaned toward light, toward becoming, just like me.